So thank you, Jeff, for leading us in our time of singing. Back in junior high, my folks wanted me to go out for basketball. And that was a bit of a fight. I was reluctant, to say the least, but I made the team. So I was in basketball. And in 8th grade, our coach, Mr. Lane, would have us do wall sits. Have any of you done wall sits? Is that familiar? Okay, I see a bunch of hands. Yeah, so he'd have us do this kind of thing, and then he would have his 9-year-old daughter, Summer, he would say, Summer, come shoot a basket. And he'd say, you guys are going to do a wall sit until my daughter makes a basket. And she loved it. She's heaving that ball up there, and we're sitting there, fire, in the legs, dying. And the question going through your mind is, when? How long do I have to hold this? Is it another 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 3 minutes? And you're kind of trying to decide what muscles am I using here, and how long do I need to be doing this? And it seemed like an eternity. Well, she'd finally make a basket, and he'd have us all stand up. All right, take a little breather. And he'd say, okay, we're going to do suicides. We're going to do sprints. And he'd say, you're going to do these until Summer makes another basket. And so once again, here we go. And she's heaving the ball and hits the rim wrong, and it bounces clear down there, and now she's running down to get it, and the whole time you're going. And once again, the question, in an even worse way, how do I pace myself? He's wanting us to keep pushing, but how long can I go? And am I going to just fall over here? And of course, if you were like me and you weren't really that excited with being there in the first place, then you're thinking, how can I endure this? And can't we just get this over with? When? It's one of the most important questions that we ask when our life gets turned upside down. There's a lot of questions that we ask, but this one is right up there at the top. It's, okay, I'm facing this. When is it going to change? When is this going to be over? When will things be made right? Because we're trying to pace ourselves. We're trying to figure out how big of a breath do I need to take to swim underwater here, so to speak. My car, the wheel just fell off back at the beginning of August. It was one of the first questions I was asking the mechanic. When are you going to have this situation figured out? How long am I going to be on foot? Is it going to be a couple days, a week, a few weeks? Now, you might say, yeah, car, that's a wimpy example, and I agree. People have lived without cars for centuries. But this when question looms so large because there's not just one thing that's wrong with the world. Rather, the sum is greater than the parts. It's that you experience something here, and you experience something here, and you experience something here, and pretty soon you can say, man, my life feels like it just got turned upside down. And there's this obvious question, which is, when, God? When are you going to make things right? The Psalms give an articulation to this question. Psalm 90, Lord, how long will it be? Have compassion on your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with your unfailing love, that we may sing for joy and be glad all our days. Make us glad for as many days as you've afflicted us, for as many years as we have seen trouble. Now, the way life goes, you can ask this one question almost anywhere you look. While I was on vacation, I saw quite a few homeless people. And I had some fruit in the van and went by one guy and was able to give him a peach, and I saw a couple who was stranded and was able to give them a couple apples. But those experiences just stir even further this sense of, wow, this is such a small thing to give to such a large experience that is touching so many people, even in Tillamook County, so many people who are barely hanging on or just can't find a place to go, can't find a place to rent, don't know what to do, they're falling through the cracks. And you give someone a piece of fruit and you're thinking, when is this situation going to change? Just before vacation, I was at Surfside, Twin Rocks High School camp as an elder, and saw quite a few youth, heard stories from the counselors of youth who are 16 years old, 18 years old, and already their life is full of pain, full of struggle, feeling alone and isolated. And you could look at a situation like that saying, when is this going to change for people who have only been alive for 16 to 18 years and already things are so painful for them? And news headlines, we all know, aren't any help at all, because constant barrage of heartbreak and corruption, and when will countries learn to play nice and not bomb one another to bits, and natural disasters just devastating communities right and left. And so there's all these when questions. And the problem is they don't stay safe. They don't just stay out there. Then they start breaking into our lives. And some of you have probably experienced some of that this last summer, where there are struggles, sometimes things you feel like you can share, sometimes you feel like you can't, but struggles that are nearly consuming, and now you're asking this question, and you feel like you're in the wall sit, so to speak, and the fire's burning, and you're saying, how do I pace myself? I don't know when this is going to change for me. I won't share any of your stories, but just to give some examples of people I know and love right now. I know a family who they felt like they were supposed to move across the country. They put their house up for sale. Everything was supposed to change, and their house didn't sell. And I left them in a place of complete ambiguity. And everyone on both ends is like, what's going on? When? They don't know. A loved one of mine recently received a diagnosis from a doctor and asked, is this lifelong? And the doctor said, well, you need to think of it as long term. Anyone who receives a diagnosis is still, even if it's terminal, they're left asking this when question, like, when is this going to change? Parents who have gone through a child rejecting them and trying to navigate, what do we do here? And the when question, when is this going to change? People who have suffered strokes and aren't driving and can't get out and feel lonely and lack of purpose and wondering, will this change for me? When? We could all look at this and say, there's these moments in our lives when we say, I thought life was going to be this way. Now it's not. And when is it going to be made right? And the truth is, it's just so hard to live with tension. In fact, psychological research, Norman Wright and Julian Mitchell have done some work on this and report that most people, they can only handle their life, like being in a crisis mode, having your equilibrium all goofed up for 6 weeks. For 6 weeks, they can handle it. And then you do something where you say, I'm going to do something about this. Now, you might make terrible decisions, unhealthy decisions. You might do something you regret, but they do something, because most people can't handle having their life turned upside down and having complete disequilibrium, if that's a word, for longer than 6 weeks. So waiting is exhausting. Like, how long do I have to wait for some kind of fulfillment? And when is this going to be over? And at the bottom of it all, we run out of resources. We don't have enough compassion for the pain. We don't have enough money for the need, or strategy for the problem, or words for the complexity. And so perhaps you relate to a moment in your life when you say, I wish this could be over with. And it's not a suicidal word. It's a, there's nothing left. I don't have anything more right now. There's no gas in the tank. And when we get to that point, I wish this could just be over with. There's something we have to notice about those moments, and it's really important. What we fail to notice about that impulse, I wish this could be over with, is that if that's our primary impulse, we aren't completely valuing God's story. I'll explain that to you so you can process it a little bit. But if the main and only thing we're saying is, I wish this could be over with, we aren't completely valuing God's story. And that changes the way we're looking at everything. If we believe that we're living in God's story, and yes, it's chock full of pain, and yes, it's chock full of redemption, but if we just say, I wish this could be over with, then we become more concerned with our situation than with the way that God is working within the story. I'll give you an illustration so you can kind of think about this. So if Molly and I are able to sit down in the evening and we decide that we're going to watch a show or a movie, and let's say Molly chooses something that just doesn't interest me. We turn it on and I'm like, yeah, I'm not into this. Then I may fall asleep. I may start scrolling my phone. But in all reality, I just want it to be over. Now, let's say I chose something and Molly's not really into it. And she says, Aaron, let's just skip to the end. Let's go to the last 3 minutes. Let's watch it. We'll see what happens. You'll be good to go. We can go to bed. Okay? I would say, no, wait. I care about the character development. And I want to see this redemptive plot. I want to see what actually happens. It's not just, what happened at the end. It's how did it unfold? How did everything in this story come to pass? I'll give you a fun clip. It's from The Princess Bride that really illustrates this way of looking at the world, which is, I just want to skip to the end. And then we'll do a little more looking.
Marriage is what brings us together today. Marriage, that blessed arrangement, that dream within a dream.
Stand your ground, men! Stand your ground!
Then love, true love, will follow you forever. So treasure your love.
Skip to the end.
Have you the wind?
Here comes my Wesley now.
Your Westley is dead. I killed him myself.
Then why is there fear behind your eyes?
Under you, Princess Baraqua,
Man and wife. Say man and wife.
man and wife.
Escort the bride to the honeymoon suite. I'll be there shortly.
He didn't come.
Okay. Just to jog your memory, I'll sum it up for you if you missed it. Just don't jog it too hard. Good job. Prince Humperdinck, this should be one of the most special moments of his life, and he wants to skip to the end. And obviously, it's because he doesn't care about the character development. He doesn't care about what's actually happening with his own bride. That's the story, but it illustrates that this impulse to get it over with, skip to the end, it doesn't value the story. So Mark 13, there's this conversation that Jesus is having with his disciples, and it starts off about the temple and the destruction of the temple. And of course the temple for Jewish folks, the disciples included, would be the center of Jewish faith and nationality and life. And so if you're talking about the end of the temple, you're talking about the end of the world. And the disciples start asking questions, kind of secretly, just the four of them, and they're trying to pull answers out of Jesus. They want signs. Jesus, when are things going to be fulfilled? When are we going to see the end? When all things will be made right? Like, Jesus, can you just skip to the end? Tell us what the signs are. And Jesus makes it abundantly clear that impulse to just get it over with, it doesn't value the story. So let's read this and then we'll talk about it a little more. Here it is, Mark 13. As Jesus was leaving the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, what massive stones, what magnificent buildings." "Do you see all these great buildings?" replied Jesus. "Not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down." As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives opposite the temple, Peter, James, John, and Andrew asked him privately, "Tell us, when will these things happen? And what will be the sign that they're all about to be fulfilled?" And Jesus said to them, "Watch out that no one deceives you. Many will come in my name, claiming, 'I am he,' and will deceive many. When you hear of wars and rumors of wars, don't be alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places and famines. These are the beginning of birth pains. You must be on your guard. You will be handed over to local councils and flogged in the synagogues. On account of me, you will stand before governors and kings as witnesses to them. And the gospel must be preached first to all nations. Whenever you're arrested and brought to trial, don't worry beforehand about what to say. Just say whatever's given you at the time, for it's not you speaking, but the Holy Spirit. Brother will betray brother to death, and a father his child. Children will rebel against their parents and have them put to death. Everyone will hate you because of me, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. When you see the abomination that causes desolation standing where it does not belong, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the housetop go down or enter the house to take anything out. Let no one in the field go back to get their cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that this will not take place in winter, because those will be days of distress, unequaled from the beginning when God created the world until now, and never to be equaled again. If the Lord had not cut short those days, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect whom he has chosen, he has shortened them. At that time, if anyone says to you, "Look, here's the Messiah," or "Look, there he is," don't believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. So be on your guard. I've told you everything ahead of time. But in those days following that distress, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. At that time, people will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory, and he will send his angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of the heavens. Now, learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see these things happening, you know that it's near, right at the door. Truly I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. But about that day or hour, no one knows. Not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Be on your guard. Be alert. You do not know when that time will come. It's like a man going away. He leaves his house and puts his servants in charge, each one with their assigned task, and tells the one at the door to keep watch. Therefore keep watch, because you don't know when the owner of the house will come back, whether in the evening or midnight, or when the rooster crows or at dawn. If he comes suddenly, do not let him find you sleeping. What I say to you, I say to everyone, watch. It's long, I know it. The disciples ask for this sign. That's what prompted that whole conversation. And you'll notice that Jesus paints this picture. And it's a picture of the struggle, the pain that we've seen throughout so much of history. Wars, natural disasters, famines, families falling apart. He paints a picture of the destruction of the temple. It happened in 70 AD. That's that whole, like, pray that winter won't come. There are plenty of people throughout the centuries who have taken these words, Mark chapter 13, and they have tried to look for the signs. They've tried to answer the question that the disciples were asking. Jesus, can we skip to the end? Tell us, what are the signs that this whole mess is finally over with and you're making everything right? And that question can come from a really good place. Like I myself, I look forward to the return of Jesus. But we have to notice that there's a really different posture. You can have this posture of sitting on the edge of your seat and you're leaning forward and you're waiting to see how the story unfolds. That's one posture. Or you can have this posture of skip to the end and you're not really thinking about the way the story unfolds. You're not really thinking about the character development and the work that God is doing within the story. There are about 7 different ways that this chapter gets interpreted, and then there's subsets of that. And many of them are concerned with skipping to the end. That the whole chapter is read as, well, can we find the answer to the disciples' question? And it's funny, we assume that Jesus is answering the question, because throughout the Gospels, when Jesus is asked questions, usually he answers with a new question, or he answers with a critique of the question. And I believe this conversation is no different, because right in the middle, if you look at verse 32, Jesus said very clearly, he said something real important. He said, I don't know. Look at verse 32. He says, about that day or that hour, no one knows. He repeats himself on that. No one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, only the Father. That's important to pay attention to because Jesus doesn't say it that often. And it might cause us to ask all kinds of wonky questions, but we should at least let it sink in that Jesus has responded to the question saying, about that day or hour, I don't know. So if someone is claiming, which we've all seen people do, they're saying, I know when the end is coming. It's going to be this year, or this date, or this month, whatever. They're trying to answer a question that Jesus already said, yeah, at least in his humanness, he said, I don't know the answer to that. And so Jesus doesn't paint this picture of the world so that he can just skip to the end. Like, here guys, we'll skip to the end. He paints this picture to give us a posture, not a prediction. And so he's recognizing that as we go through this struggle, we are just very likely to be looking for some kind of answer. And so Jesus recognizes our tendency to look for a false Messiah, a false prophet. Now, the funny thing is, I don't know that I've ever heard someone claim that they are the Messiah. Maybe you have, I haven't. And so I could look at Jesus here saying, these false messiahs, they're going to be here and there, and they're going to be really convincing. And I could say, wow, Jesus, I don't know when you're talking about. Or I could look at what Jesus is saying and say, is this my failure to see my own reality clearly? Is it that the false messiahs are subtler than I thought they were? The basic promise that a Messiah makes is that they can make everything better. A king, a savior. They say, I'm going to help you find your way out of this mess. And Jesus alludes to the fact that they're going to be turning some pretty fancy tricks. They're going to have some pretty slick words. And so you start wondering, well, are there people in this day, in this age, that would change my posture so that I'm no longer engaged in the story of Jesus because I think that I can somehow have that utopia, that let's get everything right. I could just have it right now. So advertisers, marketing, I would say that somewhere mixed into the story that they're telling me all the time is this promise that we can fix everything. We can make it better. Politicians, kings, political strategists, they're saying, hey, if you'll listen to me, we can make everything better. And the amazing thing is that whoever these false messiahs are, they can pull off some dazzling tricks. And we shouldn't say that isn't impressive work. And I'm not naming just one person or one group as a false messiah, but recognizing my posture in this world can be changed when I start believing that this person or this thing could make everything better in a pretty complete way right now. Then my posture changes. Because, and here it is, I'm not giving attention to God's story. See, all throughout this chapter, there's this word, two words, be attentive, be on guard, watch. You heard it throughout the chapter. There's two Greek words, and it means, like, make sure you're really alive on this earth. Collect your faculties and see and perceive. You may say, well, why is that so important? Like, watch? What am I watching for? Well, the stuff that you really care about, that's what you give your attention to. We all have obligatory stuff in our life. There's stuff that's like, yeah, I have to do that. But the stuff you pay attention to is the stuff you really care about. And so what Jesus is getting at is he's saying, I want you to be paying attention to God's story unfolding in a way that you engage that in a different way. And what flows out of it is storytelling. Jesus says the gospel must first be preached to all the nations. Now, we might hear that and you think, well, that's just what Aaron's doing. Think of it as storytelling. That word gospel means, in Jesus' day, it's the news of a divine ruler's birth, and then their coming of age, and their enthronement, and their speeches, and their decrees, and their acts, and it's all pointing towards fulfilling the longings of the world's happiness, and the longings of the world's desire for happiness, and desire for peace. And so, what Jesus is saying is, be in this world in a way that the most important story to you is the story of Jesus, and your life centers around that. And that's what you're looking for, is how is this story still unfolding? Like, I'm in the middle of it. What's God gonna do next? Now, any kind of conversation about telling the story of Jesus, it's an evangelism kind of note, can create anxiety in us. I don't know. I don't know if everyone likes it if I tell them about the story of Jesus. And so Jesus has this really freeing word. He's honest. These local councils, you might have people really coming after you if you make my story the most important story. But there's this really freeing part. Don't worry about what you're going to say beforehand. It will be given to you. There was a guy that I worked with, and he used to get after me. All he knew is that I went to church. And so he'd call me religious, and early on I got real uptight. And I was an anxious mess around him. I thought I had to have an answer for everything. And I thought every moment was like this pregnant evangelism moment where I'm supposed to be saying something to him. And I was super anxious. And as time went on and God helped me, I matured, whatever, I started to really like the story of Jesus, but not feel as anxious around him. And it's interesting, that's when opportunities started to change. And this is just one story. I've seen this with a lot of people. When we become non-anxious, when we just start saying, well, you know, if I love Jesus so much, and if the opportunity presents itself, I know I'll have the words, and I'll be okay with that. That's when the doors started opening. And he started asking me questions. I thought, this guy will never ask me that kind of question. But he started asking me questions about Jesus. And all the stuff I would have cooked up earlier, that was out the window. I just responded in the moment, and it was a real experience of feeling like the Holy Spirit was giving words in the moment. And the interesting thing, I think Jesus is onto something here. People can sense when we're anxious. They really don't, they're not interested in hearing it in the same way as if we're just calm and steady and they say, I want to know some more about it. Like, they're so excited about the Jesus story. I want to know more about that. Now, you may say, wow, Aaron, you're doing this evangelism thing, but I'm reading this chapter and it feels end-timey to me. I want to know those answers. I'm happy to have a longer conversation with you, but I actually think that's the point, is that Jesus is saying, you ask this question about what are the signs, and he says, I'm not answering the question of when is the end, but I'm opening a new door, a new possibility, which is storytelling. So, to go back to the when we're in our life and we're saying, man, everything is so messed up, and I'm really struggling, and I don't know when it's going to change, the door that God is opening is that storytelling door. It's that somehow right now, I'm an active character in God's story. God's the main actor, but I'm an actor. And God is looking for that character redemption. Remember, if you care about the story, you're looking at for the person who you'd say, they'll never become part of the family of faith. And God's saying, maybe you can be a part of them just starting to shuffle towards me, just barely turn towards me so I can run to them. And as we become excited about the way that God's working, it might not change what we're going through, but it does change it. It changes the way we're experiencing it. It changes our posture. And the final promise in the passage is God says, I will intervene. Jesus says, I will return with my angels together, this family of faith. Recognizing if evil was allowed to play out entirely, the whole works would be destroyed. It'd be a mess. And so Jesus gives this final word that helps us not be anxious. It's like the coach saying to us on the wall as we're sitting there, yeah, if she never makes a basket, I will eventually intervene. I'll stop you before you fall over and die. So just be excited about the story and what's unfolding. And so we come to the end of this passage and recognize we're in the middle of this thing. And so for our open worship time, I would invite you to be listening for the Holy Spirit saying, what's the important word for my soul, for the life that I have right now? so that I can be excited about the way that things are unfolding, that the way that you are doing things, while I still ask my when question, but I do value the story and what you're doing in my life. So let's take some time in silence. If you've not been a part of this time of open worship before, it's a time when we just sit and listen to the Holy Spirit. If the Spirit says something to you and you're like, I have to share that with the group, I would invite you to come and share with us. When the time is over, I will lead us in a final benediction. So let's spend some time listening to the Holy Spirit.